I think there are other pressing topics that might have been happening over the last few days in Husker land, right, Gio? Like
It's
a couple
never
of
a dull
defensive
moment.
linemen. No, sir. No, sir.
Not,
Especially where the D line is concerned, right?
yeah, two more defensive line defections,
Mm-hmm.
and we're just fishing for defensive linemen at this point.
I'd be curious to know what the football offices were like when they heard that Casey's transferring, and then the next day Tate Wildeman says, "Hey, I'm done playing football." And you've lost Damian Daniels, obviously, who's probably going to get drafted, or maybe he's an undrafted free agent. I don't know where he stands yet. You got DeAndre Thomas, who basically just quit playing football. Tony Tuioti is up in Oregon. Probably fits him better culturally. Just think it does. I don't know. He came from.
I think he'll recruit better there.
I think so too. Even though, God, he was good at developing defensive linemen. Dude, they played so good under him.
Oregon's big on the Polynesian players, like Hawaiian Polynesian players are huge on that. Their uniform or their helmet is tailored towards that.
Yeah, you're right.
He'll have no problem recruiting there. I also think he left with a fresh start. We want Frost to do well, but he's going into fifth year and his record hasn't been great. Oregon's starting fresh, so it could be a job security thing also.
You could, and I don't blame him for taking on a shot up there because, as you said, culturally it probably fits him. He brought that one Polynesian linebacker that we had recruited, went with him. Chances are his son is probably going to go up there, even though he just was here for a visit for the spring game. There's a really good chance his son's going to be playing up there. So,
and then Riley just joined them.
Really? Oh yeah, Jordan Riley just joined him. You're right. I'd forgotten about that. He was recruited by Tuioti, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. And also Lanning, their head coach at Oregon, he's a defensive coach. He was the defensive coordinator at Georgia, so it makes sense for Tuioti to make the move.
What do you think? That's a question I've been wanting to ask somebody. You've got defensive coaches moving to teams that have been known for offense, right? Like Venables going to Oklahoma, and Lanning, you said, is up there in Oregon, and they've both been defensive minded at two teams, in Clemson and Georgia that were just freaking unbelievable at defense. Do you think those guys are going to be able to produce the offense that the team's fans are used to watching, or are they just going to get all about throwing the bones, so to speak?
Well, another's Dave Aranda at Baylor.
Mm-hmm.
Baylor was very offensive for years.
They were good. Yeah, you're right.
And look,
but they were also good on offense
Jesus.
still.
Their offense still up, and their defense was great. Defense was great. They'll put it together. Recruiting's changed a lot. The defensive coordinators, their backgrounds are good though. The guys that they're hiring, like Aranda was from LSU.
That's right.
Lanning was from Georgia. Tucker was from Georgia.
Didn't Aranda coach at Wisconsin before he went to LSU? Wasn't he the defensive coordinator at Wisconsin too for a time?
I don't know where he was before LSU, but they won a championship at LSU. He was they're pretty good.
Yeah,
so
they're pretty tight.
They're coming from big businesses, so to speak. So the transition is not as bad. Pry from Penn State, he's at Virginia Tech. So I would go defensive minded. I think it's easier today to hire a defensive coach opposed to offensive coach. This is just college football is just more offensive today to begin with. So if you can actually just try on defense, you'll be fine. You're going to find offense today. It's just a given. With the change in rules, just defenses are just a lot more softer. It's just a lot.
Well, they have to be. They have to give that
now
space.
You're throwing for so many
offenses.
yards. Exactly. So now, if you can actually have a defensive identity, you'll be fine. I mean, you have to figure out the offensive staff though. So it's a little different. I think today head coaches, especially with defensive background, they give their offensive assistants free reins as opposed to before, where they were just more entrenched in what they were doing. So it's a little easier.
Case in point would be Nick Saban, right? Being a defensive coordinator in the NFL for many years and in college, and then he gets to Michigan State, and they were known for defense, even though Nebraska kicked the living piss out of them 2 years in a row back in the mid-'90s.
Right.
God, I miss those days. But he was pretty much a defensive-minded coach, played ball control offense at Alabama, his first few national championships. And then when dudes like Dabo came along that were still playing killer defense, but was also running a high-octane offense, and he got beat in the national championship game with that, he said, okay, now I've got to start transitioning to still primo on the offensive line and defensive line. That's the key. He's absolutely always got, if not the best, one of the best offensive and defensive lines in college football. And it shows, right? So, and that's how Georgia got good. Georgia got Kirby Smart. He understood what worked at Alabama, and he implemented it at Georgia. And, you get a few killer players at key positions too, to go along with how good that offensive and defensive line is. And yeah, you can win yourself some championships. That's what made Nebraska so great in the 90s. They always had a good offensive line. They always could move people. It was the defensive line that needed to do something different than what they did to win the Big Eight for so many years, get to a bowl game, and then get their doors blown off. So once we got those difference makers in the middle, and the Peter brothers and guys like Wistrom and Tomich and, Dwayne Harris and Dante Jones the year before in 94 when they won it all, and Trev Alberts, of course, being kind of the first of those guys that moved from a outside line stand-up linebacker to a hand in the dirt defensive end. That's when Nebraska got really good. And then we got stupid. We decided to share our strength and conditioning secrets with everybody. And then all of a sudden everybody started catching up. So I mean, if you don't have the line of scrimmage figured out, you're going to be in trouble, especially in the Big Ten. And like you were saying before we started recording, biggest worry you had going into and coming out of recruiting season was defensive line. For me, it was probably defensive line and offensive line. And wow, after the spring game, after watching how easy it was for Tanner and Nelson and what was the other defensive lineman or defensive end? Was it Butler, Jamari Butler? We're able to just blow by those two guys not named Corcoran and Prohaska. It just scares me for depth on offensive line too.
Well, they have numbers. That's the issue. But I said during that episode that they're not proven. It's more quantity over quality at this point as far as Big Ten offensive linemen. So, but the issue is they have numbers. They have too many guys. They can't theoretically continue recruiting too many offensive linemen. They could have added a center, but they have guys. They just want us to move around, see if the new coach can change things, at least for this season. My concern was more with the defensive line because they didn't have numbers. At that point, the time they were recorded, they're thin. They were thin before Rodgers left. So they just needed to add more guys who can play now, not long-term projects. And that was my concern. All these transfers talking about, Nebraska's going transfer heavy. The recruiting rankings weren't as high as they used to be. But as you see the transfers that came in, the focus was just too much on wide receivers and secondary. It was just excess. We needed at least 2 defensive linemen who could play immediately. They didn't have to start. They just had to be guys who were just capable of playing now. Just share some snaps.
Sure, absolutely. I completely agree. I think they got caught a little bit. I mean, I think this has kind of been the Frost MO, right? I mean, he goes heavy on skill position one year, and then the next year he goes heavy on the front 7 and the front 5 on offense, and then he goes heavy on, and it's like it seems like there's not been much of a balanced approach.
I don't think that's how you can build a team today with the transfer portal the way it is with free agency. I think every cycle you need to have some defensive linemen. You can never go wrong with more defensive linemen and O linemen as well. But he just
never
went
have
too
too
heavy
many.
with secondary, just way too heavy.
Yeah, you can never have too many of dudes in the trenches, no doubt about that. Especially guys that can really play, and because man, if we don't get a couple of big dudes like Ty Robinson size that are capable of eating up snaps and reps, Ty is going to get his butt kicked.
Right.
I mean, Colton Feast is going to give you only so much. Who's the other
Nash.
kid? Jalen Weaver is only going to give you so much. Yeah, and Hutmacher's more of a defensive end type. He's more of a mean, he's big. See, I would have picked. That's the thing. Our next episode of the Big Red Roundtable, when my buddy from Alabama is going to be on, we're going to actually pick our black shirts who we'd like to see be the starters on defense. And I was like, what are we going to do for defensive line, right? I mean, are we going to come out in 4-man front this year? Are we going to come out mostly in a 3-man? I think you're probably going to see more of an even front this year than we have. And right off the top, my guess was, okay, so that's Ty Robinson at one defensive tackle, Casey Rogers at the other when he's healthy. And then you got Tanner and Nelson coming off the edge. Well, now what without Casey Rogers? Does that mean Hutmacher's got to step up in that spot? And is he going to be capable of doing that? We know what he can do in the weight room. It was like Dawson said, yeah, he can do it all in the weight room. Now he's got to figure out how to transfer that brute strength into taking the dude, line it up across from him and making sure he doesn't want to play 4 quarters of football. And so far, he's not been on the field long enough or often enough to do that, right?
Right. Well, they're trying to add a defensive lineman from Texas Tech. I saw he played about 22 or 23 games, so he can make an immediate impact. And they're trying to add tackle. He's a defensive tackle. Yeah, he looked like he was about like 290.
That'll work.
So, Power 5 experience. That's what they needed to do from the start. Just add guys like that. Yeah, they didn't need big names. They're trying to add Mathis from TCU. He's obviously a lot harder to sign, but the Texas Tech just guys just Power 5 experience is all they need with the right size. But what do you think about the reason why he left? Do you think it's more of because of the relaxed rules and free agency today, the portal and all these offers these guys are getting? You see Mathis is apparently already receiving I think Sippo posted a 6-figure deal if he signs with Nebraska. It's already on the table.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the reason why? Because I don't think it's an internal issue. I think it's more so.
As far as Rogers, you talking about Rogers?
Rogers leaving. Because he was going to start. He has 2 more years. He was going to start for 2 straight years.
I don't know. The other question I have is if Tuioti doesn't bolt for Oregon, is Rogers still here? Is that one of the reasons why Rogers left too? Because I think he came in at the time that Tuioti did, and maybe Rogers just doesn't respond real well to Mike Dawson's style of coaching. But he hasn't really been coached by Dawson much because he's been injured, right? Since Tuioti left, he's basically been injured. So I'm not sure what the answer to that question is as far as what's going on with Rogers, except for who knows? With the transfer portal out there and with the supposed non-tampering that goes on with these guys that are playing at certain schools, you have to know there's been people out there going, dude, we've seen what you can do. Here's some cash we've got set aside with our booster buddies, and if you want it, come get it. That could be what's going on. Obviously, that's kind of what's going on with O'Shawn Mathis. I'm pretty sure TCU doesn't have a whole lot of folks around there that's going to pony up Texas type money, much less Nebraska type money. And I think if there's a reason O'Shawn Mathis does not come here and he goes to Texas, it's probably going to be because Gary Patterson is a defensive analyst at Texas. Analyst my ass. We know he's out there coaching. Or because the NIL money that he can get from Texas is going to be much higher than what he's going to get at Nebraska, which technically that should be true. But Casey Thompson said it. Hey, if you're a starter here, you can make 6 figures. I wouldn't be surprised if he's got a high 6-figure deal sitting on the table right now. All he's got to do is commit to Nebraska. And I have a feeling just maybe there's a low 6-figure deal out there for Casey Rogers that was better than whatever deal he hadn't quite nailed down here yet. I don't know. I just don't know.
My thought process, though, is I don't know. It's a little different. More, I guess, just more so just the rules, and I see all the huge offers for players for random teams and the poaching, but I think it's more so it's going to be a common thing. Like I could see starters leaving in the future just in general. It won't just be a backup, a depth issue. Because if you're an offensive lineman or a quarterback or a defensive lineman, I mean, how there's a surplus of teams who can use you now. As soon as Rodgers declared that he was entering the transfer portal, he already posted USC offered him, Washington offered him, Arkansas offered him. There's who wouldn't need a defensive tackle who can play right now? I mean, it's just the options are there, the money's there. So I think it's going to just be the start of what's to come as the new rules are implemented and NIL progresses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at us. I mean, look how many Nebraska needs defensive. They added 2 quarterbacks with Power 5 experience. They're going to add 2 to 3 defensive linemen. The offers are going to be there. I don't know what he was in a way making at Nebraska, but if you see the amount of money that they're offering Mathis to sign, you never know. Rodgers could just said, "Let's test the waters. Let's see what I can get." Look what Mathis is being offered, and that's just how it's going to be. I mean, it's just the dynamic of the NIL is just it's evolving.
Yep, no doubt about it. Nebraska has been kind of leading the way for a long time, knowing it was coming with open doors. Going into business, 6-7 years ago with Blake, whatever his name was, who played on the defense back in 2007. Those guys, him and Adi Kanalik and other former Huskers are involved with that company, seeing the handwriting on the wall and making sure that something was in place where Nebraska could get ahead of this, and hopefully, more than anything, not just drawing in dudes from the transfer portal or good high school talent, but to keep some guys in-house that they already got, right? Like a Casey Rogers. It would have been really nice to know if there was something that wasn't happening for him in the NIL side that caused him to leave. But, being the old school guy that I am, been watching college football since I was 13 years old, been a Husker fan since I was 16. I miss the days when dudes showed up because they wanted to play for, the likeness that was on the side of their helmet or on the front of their jersey as opposed to the name on the back. And I have a feeling it's going to get to the point where NIL and transfer portal are mostly going to benefit the teams that already go to the playoff anyway. So what's next? An expanded playoff, probably after 2025, which will probably lead to a super league, which if Nebraska cannot figure out how to start getting to bowl games every year over the next few years, Nebraska might be on the outside looking in at everybody in the super league, because I think that's kind of the next progression of where this is going. A 64-team super league and a 32-team playoff at the end of the year, because why not be like the NBA, right? Or the NFL and maximize profits, which I don't know. I love the idea of capitalism. I'm a capitalist to the core, but at the same time, there's something to be said for loyalty. There's something to be said for honoring a commitment that you made on both sides, from the side of the coach and the side of the player. And I fear NIL and transfer portal is ultimately going to, I don't know, take away the charm, the beauty that was college football, the pageantry, all that fun stuff. But I don't know. It's a brave new world, I guess.
Yeah, I saw Sipple post. He posted it. If you coach your players hard or a certain way, they're aching to leave. So it's like you're just catering to these guys throughout the year. It's just a lot different. But what you mentioned, one thing that stood out is Dawson. Dawson, he's a lot of experience. He's coached numerous positions. I don't think he fits today's recruiting, today's like the dynamic of NIL, player movement, internal player movement. I think Frost sooner or later will have to hire a defensive line coach who can recruit, who wants to recruit. It seems like it's more recruiting now than coaching.
Yeah.
So Dawson is not really much of a recruiter. And you just got to evolve with the times.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to be a good and you've got to be damn good at recruiting after they're here now with the transfer portal, right?
Right.
I mean, it used to be you knew you had a guy for at least 2 or 3 years because they Back in the day, you had a freshman football team. You didn't have redshirt freshmen or true freshmen that played at all. So, now you've got to promise playing time to these young kids coming in. You've got to promise playing time to transfer portal dudes coming in. And then you get to look at the roster you already have and say, hey, please stay, even though we're bringing this guy in because we think he can play better than you. It's a freaking pain in the ass to try to retain players. And like you mentioned earlier, properly maintain a roster. You've got dudes leaving at key positions that, you hadn't really gone into the transfer portal for, like defensive line, for example, or, we got a couple of offensive linemen, but God, we could have used a plugger in the middle, right? So, I feel like we're going around and around about the same stuff, but I think it all figures into the big picture, which is the big picture is completely out of focus now with the advent of the transfer portal, with the advent of NIL. Nothing is in focus. You don't know if a kid can sit there and swear up and down that he wants to play for your school, but you don't know that for sure until he gets here, and then you don't know if a guy's going to be uber talented like a Xavier Betts, and you think you're bringing in a good one who you can really teach how to love football and how to play hard. Because, hey, remember, Xavier was the guy that got here without having to fully qualify because it was COVID year. So he didn't have to, I can't remember what it was, pass a SAT or ACT with a certain school to get into the Big Ten schools. They kind of waived that because of COVID so that you could fill a roster. Excuse me. But that was, but they, a kid can sit right across from you and look you in the eye and tell you everything you want to hear. And then 2 years later, he's like, nah, I don't really want to play anymore. And then you're stuck. Granted, Nebraska's got a embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver spot, right? They got what? Still got 14, 15 scholarship dudes at wide receiver.
That's what I'm saying. So when it came to running backs and wide receivers, it's just there's excess. There's just too many. Yeah. There's too many. You need to manage the roster better than that. From a fan standpoint, it's easy to say, okay, well, some guys aren't going to make it and they'll just not be on the team. That's fine. But you need those numbers in other positions.
Right.
And that's the issue right now with D-line. We're lucky our offensive linemen haven't left. They're highly recruited, and it hasn't worked out, but yet not many have left. We lost a few, but we still have numbers. I just think recruiting, whether it's Scott Frost, the next coach, I just think you need to adapt to how things are moving. I don't think you can – the days of you plugging a certain position or two heavily in one class, I think that needs to end. You can't just say, okay, this class we're going to have 6 offensive linemen, and then we're good there for the next 2 or 3 years. Those days are done. You cannot recruit like that anymore. You need to just
not with
spread it around position-wise.
For sure.
In each class.
Let me ask you this question, since you seem to have some pretty good insight into things. Do you think once Corcoran, Prohaska come back, and the fall kind of shakes out, and we look like we've got our 5 dudes, and if Ben Hart isn't one of those 5 dudes that run out there to start in Double N, do you think Ben Hart's in the portal before it's all said and done? I do. I think Ben Hart's gone if he's not going to start or play much this year.
Well, Teddy, when will he return? It seems like he won't be ready for the start of the season due to his injury.
Well, my understanding is he's supposed to be back by fall. But how good is he going to be? Because that was a pretty serious ACL tear.
That's my issue. Yeah, he might not be ready for the first 3 weeks.
So, Ben Hart might be needed, but good God.
So that's my answer. So, he just never, and we don't have a center yet. We don't have a proven center yet. So there's options. So
yeah, I wonder if they're going to hit the portal for a guy that's actually going to be, that's been a center, or if they're going to ride with Hickson. I thought Hickson was pretty good, but and I don't think we're going to be snapping from the shotgun near as much as we did in the spring game. We did a little bit under center, but I don't think we're going to be going shotgun near as much as we did in the spring game. But that's just me.
Yeah, that's my issue with the class they signed. Just the same thing. It's you shouldn't get to this point. They should have signed a center. You know, there'd have to be a big name center. They should have signed one. You know, it could have been a preferred walk on. Just bring a guy who's played center in, and they didn't go after that. They went after all these wide receivers, and they addressed special teams.
Like you said, they've got plenty of offensive linemen on the roster, right? And they their philosophy since Frost has been here is find the 5 best dudes and plug them in the best spots that they can play. So I don't think they really saw the need to go after a dude that specifically specialized in center. I figured they could just plug anybody in anywhere. I would have. Yeah, to me, that makes sense. Because to me, I've never been, even though Fisher seems to make it work in the DB room, I've never been a fan of jack of all trades coaching. Because if you're the jack of all trades, if you can play any position on the line, that means you're not good at any one of the 5 of them. You know what I mean? You're not an expert at one of those 5 spots. Prohaska, as a true freshman, sure as hell looked like he knew exactly what he was doing at left tackle, because that's the only thing he's played since he's been here, best I can tell. So I wish they would have gone after a center for sure. I'm with you on that, but I'm also not afraid to see a dude like Hickson see what he can do, especially since I don't think we're going to be running so much RPO. Not going to be running near as much shotgun. I think you're going to see a lot more play action game, something that gives him an opportunity to move forward when he snaps the ball, as opposed to taking a step to the side like it seemed like our offensive line was doing under Austin.